I'm excited to share just a bit of my journey, what I've been thinking about lately, and my hope is always, my prayer is always that maybe some of the things that I've been thinking about will match up in some way with things that you've been thinking about, and something that I've discovered can be an encouragement to you where you are right now. Let's just pray really quick. Lord, thank you so much. Thank you so much for who you are, for never giving up on us, for being worthy of all of our praise. Thank you for the chance this morning to take some time away from whatever we've poured ourselves into this week and just to rest in your presence. Thank you for the chance to reflect on who you are and what you've done for us. And Lord, just give us the courage to keep our eyes focused on you always. Open our hearts now as we discuss and think about just how to find balance in our lives, and help us to allow you to be the guiding one as we navigate that. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So you know the moments that you wish you could just freeze? You wish they would stop, never end. You wish you could stop the hands of time. Maybe it's a breathtaking sunset. Maybe it's the look in your lover's eye. Maybe it's the feeling of a child's face pressed up against yours and their arms tight around your neck. Sometimes it can be the glow after someone shares a genuine affirmation with you. It could be the quiet sense of hope that you find in the midst of a struggle, maybe a lonely struggle that only you know about. It could be the power of a thundering waterfall, or maybe the feeling of the beating ocean waves against your feet. It could be the aha moment after you've really thought about something for a long time and finally the dots start to come together and things make sense for a moment. It could be the peace of a quiet, unrushed meal with a close friend, or maybe I'm the one who cries, but the tear-jerking moment at the end of a really good movie. These are some of the moments that we have peace, joy, we feel hope. And then there's reality. I was recently, a month or so ago, I was playing the piano at a retirement home near our church where we go once a month, and I really get into it. People who know me know I kind of get lost in the music. I play, I throw my head back and sing, and I'm not really completely aware of what's going on around me. So I was sitting playing, thinking about how amazing it was that God could use people like us to bless others, and how wonderful it was to have a chance to sing and to worship. And all of a sudden, this thing sitting on the piano, one of those, deodorizers on a timer, just sprayed my face with deodorant. I couldn't breathe. I was all of a sudden thinking about, how am I going to get through this song? Why are we here? It smells bad in here anyway. Our music is pathetic. These people are all like half asleep, not even hearing what we're saying. And I was, so to speak, jolted back to reality. And this is a trite example, but it's kind of how life is. We have these moments, and then there's reality. We want the moments to come more often or to last longer, but they don't. Instead, reality sets in. We tell ourselves, don't be so childish. We live in the real world. We do everything that we know how to kind of protect ourselves from more pain and disappointment. And a lot of times I think we work on the assumption that pain and disappointment mean hope and fulfillment is eluding us. But it's actually kind of an age-old misconception if you really think about it. Remember the disciples who asked Jesus about the blind man? Who sinned, this guy or his parents? And even today, we look at people's lives. We see someone with a successful career, or someone with a happy family, someone who goes on fun vacations. We see someone who has a car that not only runs, but it looks cool too. And we think, wow, this person must have done something right. But it's just not that simple. Ravi Zacharias wrote a book called Recapture the Wonder, and in there he points out that it's shallow reasoning to deduce that because pain and unfulfilled dreams have brought disappointment to our experience, that life itself must therefore be hollow and purposeless. Fulfilled dreams aren't necessarily fulfilled hopes, and attainment and fulfillment are not the same thing. So so how do you live? How do you balance this tension between wanting these moments of wonder and wanting these moments of fulfillment, and yet living in a mundane world? How do you navigate that journey between emotional high points and the sharp edges of sorrow that inevitably come into our lives? This is a question that I think people have been thinking about for a long time, and I like the wisdom literature in the Hebrew Bible. I think it's a great place to turn when you're thinking through some of these types of issues. So if we read in Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, the great teacher from, let me just explain, Kohelet means assembly. So that's the Hebrew word that kind of shows these words would have been spoken before groups of people, kind of collective wisdom. And the teacher writes in chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, I thought in my heart, come, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is foolishness, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of a man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. I think this just sums up so well how we have a tendency to equate a so-called good life with pleasure, with having more, maybe with comparison, with being somehow more successful than someone else, with being in a place in life where we don't have to say no to ourselves. We don't have to deny ourselves anything. And yet, in all of our efforts to kind of achieve that ideal moment one more time, we use our smarts, we watch what works and doesn't work for other people, we apply things we've learned in the past. We try to make sure nothing can foil our plans. But like the wise teacher said in this passage repeatedly, he tried to search out all these things, but always holding on to wisdom. So you're searching for the moment of wonder, of pleasure, of comfort, and yet you're holding on to wisdom because you want to make sure you're being the smartest and you have something there protecting you. You've thought through what you're doing. He says, in all this, my wisdom stayed with me. But even when we use our smarts and whatever resources we have to kind of reconstruct moments of wonder in our lives, any of those moments where we wish we could go back to, we wish we could have stayed there forever, it just doesn't work. No matter how careful we are, the much anticipated moment usually isn't all that we expected it or hoped it to be. And if you read on the next verse in Ecclesiastes 2:11, he came to the same conclusion. He said, after all this, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So let's look for a moment at some imagery that might help us think through this. I think the picture called to mind by the title of my message, Walking the Line Between Wonder and Reason, it kind of connotes maybe, a space like this, and there's a line, there's a specific line, and if you stray one side or the other, you have somehow gone into dangerous ground, perhaps. that there is only one ideal, perfect balance, and if you stay right in that spot, you're safe. But I think that's not the best way to look at it. Neither wonder nor reason is really inherently negative. They're both, if you think about it, they're God-given ways of viewing the world around us, of viewing our lives. But ironically, somehow along the way, we've come to fear both of them. Regarding wonder, we think things like wonder belies ignorance. It's for children. It's for people who are naive. Anyone who has lived in the real world knows better than to seek too much of that reckless abandon in their lives. There's no time for mysticism and idealistic dreaming, we say. And then there are those who say if you look for wonder in the wrong places, you might just be taken over by New Age ideas, and they will tear you away from the truth. Then there are people who think, you might be able to achieve this moment of wonder, but it's going to be taken away anyway, so why try? Why won't the abrupt transition back to real life make it worse than if you had never experienced that moment anyway? These are some of the ways that we think about wonder, and we somehow have learned to think of it as something to be feared. Then we do the same thing with reason, and I think Christians especially fall prey to this. We can view logic kind of as the enemy of our Christian faith. C.S. Lewis said, he famously said, you either have to accept Jesus as a flaming lunatic or as the Son of God, right? There's no option in between. And Paul said the same thing to the Corinthians. The foolishness of the wisdom of God is foolishness to the world, and vice versa. So there's something about, there's this dichotomy in Christianity between logic and between the facets of the faith, the truth that we hold to. And evangelicals have taken this the wrong way a lot of times, and they've become, we have become leery of education, of learning, of asking too many questions. It's taboo to ask about certain things, and exposing ourselves maybe to philosophical reasoning or relying too much on our human logic, we fear, might make us unable to hear the still small voice of God. But I would submit that as we navigate kind of this line, this journey that involves both wonder and reason, that there's not necessarily a very, very only one specific right way. That we're not choosing between a right and wrong. Both have their pitfalls, but they're also both gifts from God. And striving either to live kind of always in wonder, always in that moment of rapture, or to perfectly understand the world around us is really fruitless. I think instead, what we need to do, what we find described in the Bible, is to keep our eyes forward. And because of that, I think the image of a tightrope walker might be a better imagery to use, a more useful metaphor. So we step out on a journey. We try to cross that huge divide between today and the day that we're going to come face to face with our God. And there's no perfect balance between wonder and reason, between emotion and our will. The proportion is always changing. You're always adjusting the balance. Lean a little bit this way, a little bit that way, but our eyes are on the rope, always looking forward. The rope bears our weight, guides us one step after one step to the other side. We balance, but the rope supports us all the way. Just like Christ, who is really the bridge that crosses the great divide, bears us up always, continually. And the key for us is to keep our eyes on him, just our eyes fixed on him. If you read later in Ecclesiastes, chapter 5, verse 7, the teacher comes to something like this. He says, "Much dreaming and many words are meaningless. Therefore, stand in awe of God. Here is God. Look at him. He's greater than anything that we can arrange and figure out ourselves. So what I'm learning from this, even this text, stand in awe of God. Like at the end of the book, he says something similar, that the conclusion of the whole matter is to fear God. Fear God. God is someone bigger than we are, and that's what we need. We need to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. So let's just look at a few. There are a few examples. There are a lot, actually, but we'll look at only a few examples in the Bible of people who were on this journey, kind of navigating between moments of wonder and kind of using their will to arrange their lives. One warning, these people that we read about in the Bible are, I'm sure you know this already, they're not what we would call emotionally stable or consistently successful, or, they're just not these dream life people that we sometimes want so much to be. But they, despite not living picture postcard type lives, they still discovered that through all the trials, through the great times, through the hard times, there was a bigger reality beyond their circumstances, beyond their feelings. So Moses, he was the man who lived life as a royal in the Egyptian court and also as an exile. He had all, and other times he had nothing. He suffered horrible guilt. He murdered someone and had to run away. And yet, he discovered that God could redeem his experience. And he became the man who said eventually, Lord, blot me out of your book of life rather than forsake your people. You have to stay with your people. And he said these words in his prayer at the end of Deuteronomy. He said, remember the days of old. Consider the generations long past. Ask your father, and he will tell you. Your elders, and they will explain to you. The Lord's portion is his people. In a desert land he found them, in a barren and howling waste. He shielded them and cared for them. He guarded them as the apple of his eye, like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, that spreads its wings to catch them and carries them on its pinions. The Lord alone leads them. No foreign god had to lead them. That's Moses, after all these experiences in life, zeroing back in on, wow, look what God has done for me. He's worthy of praise. And if you ever wonder, he gives us good advice. Ask your fathers. Ask those who have walked the journey before you. There is always someone who's walked ahead of us. Then we go to David. You guys know the story of David. He spent much of his life, in hiding, running for his life. He was also the one who danced with reckless abandon before the ark of God when it was brought back to the place of Israel. And if you read the Psalms, you notice that David was just, he experienced the spectrum of human emotion, the spectrum of human thinking. So many experiences are mirrored in his writing. If you read Psalm 63, this ironically comes with the heading. This was a Psalm of David when he was in the desert of Judah, most likely running from someone. And he wrote, "O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you, and my body longs for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips, my mouth will praise you. On my bed, I remember you, and I think of you through the watches of the night. Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. My soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me." Again, he's longing for God, and despite the fact that life circumstances aren't ideal, he's resting in this solid presence that God has offered him. Then you have Jeremiah. he's the weeping prophet. He wasn't happy. It wasn't an easy job that he was given. And he was comfortable. I mean, he told God that. Why have you done this? He said, he cursed the day he was born. He said, your words have brought disaster to my life. And yet at the same time, he said, regarding the words of God, if I don't mention him, and I say I'll speak no more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. Despite the discomfort of what he was called to, he still sensed he was part of something so much bigger than he himself. And he couldn't give up on that, no matter how much easier it looked. Then Habakkuk is another great example. He spends the first 2 chapters of his prophetic book kind of arguing, so to speak, with God. He is agonizing over the unreasonableness of God's allowing a wicked power, like the Chaldeans, to come against God's own people. So Habakkuk says to God, your eyes are too pure to look on evil. Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? We ask these kind of questions. Why do bad things happen to someone like this who's done everything right, who loves God so much? We try to figure it out. And yet, at the end of Habakkuk's book, there's the famous prayer, though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls. This is representative of sustenance, of life, of wealth, of everything that would offer survival and success in his world. It's all gone. Though none of this is here, he says, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. Again, nothing makes sense. He hasn't received an answer that satisfies his questions, his discomfort with how things are working out. And yet, he still sees and acknowledges, here's God, a reality bigger than himself, and he is ready to just rest in that, to rejoice in God, his Savior. I think it's interesting that if you think about wonder and reason, I said I think they're both gifts from God. They're both ways that he's given us to kind of look at the world. They also have really similar pitfalls, ways that we can misuse or misunderstand them. So wonder, this moment of great pleasure, of peace, of just calm that we want to return to, it can so easily be confused with physical pleasure or with physical comfort. And yet, when we get to the pleasure or to the comfort, after all of our striving for it, the wonder of the moment is artificial, or it just flees. It's fleeting. It doesn't last. And reason also, it has the pitfall of being so easily confused with familiarity. We feel safe when we're around thinking and customs that we already know. We like to be in control. We like to be able to kind of manage how life and how our belief system is going. We work hard. I mean, we want to make sense of the world, and we want to make sense of God, to somehow explain God. And I would say, when I look at these two things, the greatest danger in both of them is maybe something like that temptation to take things into our own hands, to try to protect ourselves, to focus on what's good for us. And when we do that, when we seek to protect ourselves, when we seek to take things back, our eyes come off of Jesus. We're no longer looking forward. We're somehow sidetracked by other things that are not what's going to carry us forward. We want things to go the way we want. Even just yesterday, I was at the eye doctor. My husband said, "Oh, I'll call you and give you the credit card number to pay for the eye doctor," and his phone was dead. And so I called him for an hour and a half, just waiting, no answer, no answer. Something so small as that, something doesn't go like we planned, and life just falls apart. And it's so tempting, it just can be so tempting to try to protect ourselves from these, and that's a trite example. I mean, there are so many bigger examples. We try to hold our families together, hold our image together. And reason can lead us to just strive for familiarity and control rather than focusing on Jesus, no matter what the cost of doing that. So I think sometimes in pouring our whole effort into protecting ourselves, into safeguarding our moments of wonder, trying to get more, we might risk out on actually the greatest wonder of all. Think of God. If God is light, right? The Bible says God is light. Then maybe wonder is the shadow. We can chase the wonder. We can chase the shadow, and we're going to never catch it. But if we walk toward the light, if we walk toward God, the wonder will pursue us always. Ravi Zacharias points out, too, he talks about worship as a way of wonder, of living in wonder. And this kind of reminded me of the song that we sang earlier, where it says the sound of angels' awe, the sound of the angels' song, or singing in the presence of the King. I mean, this is worship. This is worship, like described in Revelation. And Zacharias, he says, the emotion propelled by the will touches deep in the imagination to lift the spirit into the very presence of God. That's just a great description of how our capacity to deeply feel and our capacity to think and to make conscious choices in how we propel our lives. Both gifts from God, they work together to bring us into the presence of God. So I think it's up to us to kind of choose each day. We can choose to risk the unfamiliar. We can choose to hope in God directly rather than hoping in circumstances. We can choose to let go of our walls of protection that we may have built up over the years, and we can open our hearts. And I know this hurts. It hurts to open our hearts. It hurts to let go of protection, but it's okay. Hurt is okay. Jesus never promised our comfort or the smoothness of our lives. He promised a journey that was going to be worthwhile. And if we hurt, that is a signal, a beautiful signal that we're still alive. We're completely alive, that we still have the ability to feel. Hardened hearts don't feel, but soft hearts do feel, and it's going to hurt sometimes. But we can look to the people who have walked ahead of us in the Bible, other people in our lives, and we can see that sometimes the moments of the greatest fulfillment, the greatest hope, the greatest purpose somehow coincide with moments of pain. Sometimes the most beauty is right in the midst of pain. Sometimes it's in the midst of when everything's going fine. But these dichotomies that we have created somehow, that we're taught, don't always match with the picture that we find in the Bible. And we have to strain toward focusing on Jesus and not allowing ourselves to be sidestepped. So living a life of wonder doesn't mean everything will be fun or comfortable. It might be, and that's great, but it might not be as well. But it does mean that we are part of a reality so much bigger than ourselves. We're choosing to be awed by the greatness and the tenderness of our God. And living a life of reason also, it doesn't mean that everything's going to make sense. But it means that we accept, we acknowledge that God is bigger than any of our questions, any of our doubts, any of our anger toward how circumstances may be working out. And we're choosing instead to somehow explore our world, explore our life with our hand in His. He's guiding us. He's showing us the next step. And we're accepting. That's enough. So in the words of the Leanne Womack song, I'm sure you guys know it. I hope you never lose your sense of wonder. You get your fill to eat, but always keep that hunger. May you never take one single breath for granted. God forbid love ever leave you empty-handed. I hope you still feel small when you stand beside the ocean. Whenever one door closes, I hope one more opens. Promise me that you'll give faith a fighting chance. And when you get the choice to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance. And I would add to that, I would take it one step further. I hope you dance. I hope you allow God to lead you out onto the dance floor. Because as we read in 1 Corinthians 2:9, there is no eye that has seen, no ear who has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. It's really worth it, you guys. It's worth it to keep your eyes forward, to just keep navigating that always changing balance between wonder and between using the mind that God has given you to make wise choices that propel you toward his kingdom. And he's going to walk with you. He has amazing plans in store for us.